Hey guys, so today we are gonna review some area stuff. I know a lot of you guys are familiar with finding the area of a rectangle or a square. We're gonna review that. We're gonna go into triangles, which some of you may have done before. The nice thing about this unit is that calculators are allowed, but I'm gonna be showing you the work you still need to show and then what you're allowed to type into the calculator to not show the work. The first thing I want to talk about is what area is. This is just going to help us remember how to use the correct units. I'm going to use number 2 to demonstrate. So if I have this square, it's 3 by 3. What this basically means is that there's 3 sections going up and down. Pretend that I'm drawing equal sections. And that there's 3 sections going across. And again, pretend my sections are equal. So that's 3 by 3. And then area means how many squares there are. If you were to count them up, you would see that there are 9 squares, which is why we would say that the area is 9 centimeters squared. The squared comes from the fact that we're literally counting squares instead of just counting like a straight line. So that's what area is. I'm going to show you how to show the work for that. When we're finding area, we always have to multiply numbers that are perpendicular to each other. That means they meet at a right angle. And for rectangles, all the numbers always meet at a right angle. So there's a little right angle there. And what that means is that this purple line and this blue line meet at a perfect corner, a perfect right angle. In rectangles and squares, that's kind of the only option. But remembering that idea is going to help us when we look at triangles too. So in order to find the area of something like this, the formula is area equals base times height. You might have also heard area equals length times width, which is true, but usually as you get into higher levels of math, we use base times height instead. It doesn't matter which number is the base and which number is the height. So we would say 5 times 10, or we would say 10 times 5. It doesn't matter. So area equals 5 times 10. And that means area equals 50. And we have to remember the units, 50 feet squared. What you're allowed to use your calculator for is the actual multiplication step. So basically you don't need to show any scratch work, but I should still be able to know what 2 numbers you multiplied. You won't get credit if your work just says 50. Even if you go and do units and you say 50 feet squared with no work, that doesn't count as done. I have to know that you're doing 5 times 10. So at minimum, this is how your work should look. I should see that you're doing 5 times 10, and then I should see that your answer is 50 feet squared with the correct units. Number 2, I already showed you. With the picture, but I didn't really show my work. I didn't show what I was multiplying. So the correct way to show work for that would be to do 3 times 3 and then to say, okay, that equals 9 centimeters squared. Box your answer. So that's the work you need to show. Take a moment, finish up the page, pause the video, and come back when you're ready to look at some answers. On number 3, you should have done 4 times 4 and said that that equals 16 centimeters squared. And you had to have the 4 times 4 part. Number 4, you had to do 7 times 2. Oh, I just realized on my previous one, I wrote centimeters, but it was supposed to be inches. Sorry, inches squared. Number 4, 7 times 2, or you could do 2 times 7. That order doesn't matter. That equals 14 yards squared. Box your answer. And then on number 5, 10 times 8 or 8 times 10 equals 80 feet squared. Check over your work. Make sure you have all the required elements. All right, we're going to look at triangles now, which are just a tiny bit more complicated, but not really much more complicated. So the triangle formula, which some of you guys might be familiar with, it comes from the area formula of a rectangle. So if we have this rectangle here, a made up rectangle, and I split it in 2. Now I have 2 triangles. I have a triangle on the top and I have a triangle on the bottom. So the way to find the area of this triangle would be to find the area of the rectangle, which is base times height, and then divide it by 2. The more professional way to write this, though, and the way that we're going to be writing it, is area equals 1/2 times base times height. These two formulas mean the same thing, but the top one is usually used like in elementary school, and the bottom one is usually used like in middle school, high school, college, etc. So we're going to be using the more professional one. But that's why the formula is what it is. It's like saying take half of a rectangle, and that'll give you the area of the triangle. So let's take a look. If you want to write that formula really big on the top of your screen, I think that would help you. Area equals 1/2 times base times height. With a triangle, you always have to find the right angle. So if you look at number 1, and I'm trying to make the formula visible too. If you look at number 1, that little box that I'm going to color in pink right now, that's the right angle. That tells me that the numbers that are involved with that right angle are the numbers I want to use. And that's the hardest part of remembering how to find the area of a triangle. If you look, this one is going to make a purple T. We always want to find a T or an L when we're finding the area of a triangle, because those are the numbers that make the right angle. Let's look at how to use this formula. So it's area equals 1/2 times base times height. In a triangle, usually the number on the outside is the base, but it doesn't really matter. So 1/2 times 10 times 5. 5 is usually considered the height because it's going like in the middle of the triangle. But if you flip those, it doesn't matter. Then, to find this answer, you could either type this into your calculator or you could do it mentally. I'm going to show you how to do it mentally first. If there's an even number like 10, the first thing I would do is 1/2 times 10. You're allowed to multiply numbers in any order you want. So even if it was 1/2 times 5 times 10, since it's all multiplication, I could choose to do the 1/2 times 10 first. That only works because it's all being multiplied. So 1/2 times 10 is 5. Half of 10 is 5. And then I have to multiply it by the remaining 5. So in my head, I'm thinking, okay, this is 5 times another 5. I'm just thinking that in my head. And that equals 25 inches squared. If you were going to type it into your calculator, let me show you how I would type it in. Instead of doing 1/2, this looks kind of weird. Why is it like this? We'll see. Instead of doing 1/2, I would do 0.5. Where is my decimal? Looks like my calculator changed up on me. Oh, basic. That's what I want. Okay, there we go. So I want 0.5 instead of 1/2 times 10 times 5. That equals 25. So you can type it in that way. You could also type in 10 times 5 divided by 2. That equals 25 as well. So you could use calculator or you could use mental math strategies. Let's try number 2. So here I see my right angle, and instead of making a T, it makes an L. The formula is area equals 1/2 times base times height. For triangles, I'm going to ask that you start by writing the formula first because it's such a hard one for people to memorize, and if you write it every time, you're going to know it better. So everybody's first step should be to write the formula down. Area equals 1/2 times base times height. Step number 2 is to plug in the numbers. 1/2 times 18 times 18. Even if they were different numbers, it wouldn't matter which one you have first and which one you have second. Here's where you finally get to take a shortcut and use a calculator. So you could use whatever strategy you want to do 1/2 times 18 times 18. Do that, come back, and see what the answer is. All right, hopefully you've paused the video and you found that answer. So I'm going to type 0.5 times 18 times 18. I don't think I typed it in right. Hold on. 0.5 times 18 times 18 equals 162 feet squared. Area always has feet squared. So that's the whole way you get to use the calculator. Just instead of doing scratch work, you get to type it into the calculator. Try numbers 3 and 4 on your own and then come back when you're ready to go over it. All right, hopefully you're ready to go over it. On number 3, I have a T here. Here's my right angle. I have to start with the formula. If you forgot the formula, write it in now. For triangles, we want to start with the formula. 1/2 times base times height. So 1/2 times 11 times 14. But you could have switched the 11 and the 14. And then you could either type it into your calculator or use a mental math strategy. For me, I'd rather use the mental math strategy. I could multiply 1/2 times 14 in my head. That's 7. Half of 14 is 7. And then times 11 is 77 meters squared. And then on number 4, start with the formula. Area equals 1/2 times base times height. That's 1/2 times 26 times 9. I know that 1/2 times 26 is 13, but I don't know 13 times 9 immediately. So here I'm going to use my calculator. So I'm going to do 0.5 times 26 times 9. And that gives me 117 centimeters squared. All right, that's all I'm going to show in the